As weapons systems develop, what the military needs from psychology changes a little. Moving on to a slightly different area. Jerry Bruner, you know, Ulrich Neisser was also very important in the development of cognitive psychology, and he originally coined the term cognitive psychology in a very significant book in 1965, bringing all the topics together and labeling them as a subdiscipline, really, within psychology.
The dream of creating a controllable mind that could be programmed was far from over. It was about to take a strange new twist. Cognitive science came up with a new idea. If it was impossible to make the human mind behave like a machine, the alternative was to make a machine with a mind of its own. Scientists now began to build intelligent machines with memories that could be programmed. They taught them to recognize and to understand the world around them. The scientists were inspired by the same underlying belief that had driven the experiments of the 1950s, that the mind and the computer were identical. But they were going to push this idea much further.
A lot of people thought that the mind was in some respects like a computer. But there were others, they insisted something much more radical, which was that the mind is a computer. And the only good psychological theory is a computer program, because basically there's just a computer in the head. It was a heady idea for them. They had the notion that very soon, using these new computer techniques and ideas, they would be able to simulate the processes on the computer. And when people are that confident, they are good salesmen for their ideas, and a lot of people bought it.
At this very same moment, the Cold War also changed direction. It was no longer fought out by human agents. It became instead a war of machines. Both sides now possessed enough nuclear missiles for what was called mutual assured destruction, or MAD. The fear was that the slightest mistake could lead to all-out war. To those in charge of America's defense, the idea of intelligent machines was extremely attractive. Their memories would be completely controllable. Unlike human beings, they would not make mistakes.
Artificial intelligence emerged at the point at which there was the immediate worry of a war, some kind of a rationally breaking out war, and that maybe this was some way of helping to control the situation. So there was a lot of magic thinking, I think, that was set loose by the concept of artificial intelligence, that we would have a wonderful kind of control, a big brother control kind of thing, and it was always a tempting one. It wasn't quite a mean Orwellian one. It was like the people in Orwell, they thought it would be great. Things would be looked after. And scientists, you have to understand, always go the easy route.
Once again, cognitive science became caught up in the political pressures of the Cold War. The Department of Defense, through its research agency, ARPA, offered to fund the whole of the new discipline of artificial intelligence. In return, the scientists' work would be used to build intelligent weapons. The source of this funding was kept very quiet. The scientists were embarrassed. They didn't want the public to find out what their real job was.
You have to remember that ARPA's funding of artificial intelligence was for military purposes, but many of the people in that community come from liberal intellectual institutions. They particularly are not interested in military objectives. And so ARPA has always been very good at being able to marshal those forces and to trick them or lead them or move them in directions that have significant military benefits. It had an explicit goal of transitioning this technology into the military-industrial complex.
How do you trick these researchers, these scientists?
You lead them in directions that are useful militarily without explicitly asking them to think about the applications. So we'd say to them, let's work on TV image processing. And they would get results that would be applicable to processing of imagery for military purposes.
Slow. Pitch. Ready. Execute.
During the
So the information processing requirement moved from just dealing with human information processing, but machine information processing and the interaction between the two. This is an account from 25 years ago, which in some ways is quite prophetic, but in other ways hopelessly naive.
Our work in the area of battle management is aimed at expanding the capabilities of the battle management systems, expanding the detection capabilities, expanding the capabilities of our sensors, increasing the abilities of our commanders to command their troops. We have sophisticated sensors, sophisticated surveillance devices. We have high-speed computers that process information. We have all kinds of pattern recognition devices that allow us to understand what objects are long before we might have if we could see them with our own two eyes.
The key point is that what they're trying to do is to, or what they succeed in doing really, is to remove war from actual experience or from human agency. That what you're seeing is increasingly a simulation of war.
War is now less about hand-to-hand and more about hand-to-keyboard. These aren't warriors. They're computer jocks. They don't even have to go into battle to fight. These machines are so sophisticated, they've merged the real with the unreal. They've made war virtual.
Well, the computer graphics have come on a lot in 30 years, but that does effectively predict the rise of the drones. But of course, other aspects of war are still as close and dirty as they always were. And now we have asymmetric war, in which perhaps the two sides are working in completely different systems. This is one of the papers in cognitive psychology that I showed you before, financed by the Office of Naval Research. And it might not have been obvious what that was about, but this is about how to make effective computer presentations of smoothly curved surfaces, which is what we need for CGI, and it's what the military need for their remote control systems. And 15 years after that, we now have drones as the weapons of choice. Other weapons are necessary, but this is an important part of the arsenal nowadays. I was hoping to show you a video clip here, but for copyright reasons I'm not able to. The details of the program it came from are here. You might be able to find it online. But it was a program about artificial intelligence, and the clip showed the work that Poggio and associates were doing using a neural net system to develop a machine application to recognize vehicles and people in particular in crowded urban landscapes. And Poggio was very happy and enthusiastic that his system was working very well. Well, that gave me a shiver at the time, because I thought what's being developed here is an urban targeting system. And 10 years ago or so, I made up this simulation to show the kind of thing that such a system could do. Pick out vehicles, pick out people to be targeted. And yeah, that's true. And if you look at who's paying for the development of this, you'll see under the authors Leo Wolf and Tommaso Poggio in the Brain and Cognitive Sciences Department at MIT, sponsored by DARPA. Another paper by Leo Wolf and the team, the same institution, financed by the Office of Naval Research, because developing these systems is advantageous to the military. My response seems a bit naive now, because of course things have moved on enormously in 10 years. My camera now in portrait mode will give me a choice of whether it will autofocus on the left eye or the right eye of the subject. This means this is a system which could choose to put a bullet through the left eye or the right eye of the subject. So, the last two sections really, the rise of cognitive psychology, and then moving on to computational psychology and artificial intelligence, was quite heavily financed by the military because it was useful. As weapon systems developed, the kind of psychological and cognitive knowledge that the military required developed, and psychology research was financed to support that. We'll go on to talk about neuroscience in a bit. Okay, are you convinced? Or is this just the ravings of a burnt-out ex-hippie? I think you should examine the evidence that I've given you. How many sources am I using? And even if it's so, is it a problem? Certainly, you can find large areas of cognitive psychology which don't seem to have military applications. There's a fascinating area of research about colour naming systems and how that interacts with our perception and discrimination of colour, visual illusions maybe. You could probably think of more examples. Also, the kind of research which is financed by the military turns out to be really useful for other purposes, like my camera's autofocus system. But selecting and training bus drivers and pilots, command and control research is valuable in all kinds of emergency services and for dealing with all kinds of problems. You could also do the exercise that I did, going through papers and looking for how the research was financed. You'll find lots of other sources of finance besides the military. You may also find some other areas of psychology, we'll move on to some in a bit, where there is also military finance. So check the articles. Read the bits at the end as well as just the abstract.